So now it's time to get down to the PyTorch part, the fun part. So since we have an idea of what the images and the metadata look like, we can now get straight down to the modeling part. Okay, so the first step in our modeling part is to define something called a PyTorch dataset. So what a PyTorch dataset has three functions. Okay, it has exactly three functions. One is init, the second one is len, and the third one is getItem. So the init function, which is here, it basically initializes a bunch of different things related to the data set. Like it can initialize the data frame, the targets, the augmentations, image IDs, etc. And that's what the init function does. It just initializes a bunch of things. And the next function is len. So len, all it does is it gives the length of the data set, how big the data set is. It basically tells the data set how many indices it can iterate over. And then getItem. GetItem retrieves the data point at a particular index. So if I say getItem self comma I, this I is the index, the I over there is the index at which you want to retrieve a sample. So now if you dig deeper into what's happening in the code, you can see init, right? df, aug, tag, and IDs. df is basically the data frame with all the metadata, right, with which we're initializing the data set. Self.df equals df, and targ is the is whether we have targets or not, right? And for the training data, self.targ will be true. For the testing data, it will be false, because for the training data we actually have targets, but for the testing data we don't. Okay, self.aug is whether we want augmentations or not, which will set true for training and false for testing, because we don't want image augmentations to be happening during testing. We only need it for training. And then image IDs contains a list of all the image names which we're going to load the images from. So now let's dig a bit deeper into what aug does. So all we're doing here, you can see the set image transformations function which I've selected here. It defines three simple transforms: normalize, vertical flip, and horizontal flip. What these things do is they basically normalize the images and then randomly flip them across the vertical or horizontal axes, right? So as you can see, p equals 1 for normalize. That means we want to normalize every image, and vertical flip and horizontal flip have a probability of 0.5. That means we want a 1/2 probability of flipping each time. But it's also possible for both flips to happen. So it completely depends on chance, right? We have a 0.5 probability for both. That means there's a 0.25 probability of both transforms happening, right? A 0.25 probability of each of them happening, and another 0.25 probability of neither of them happening. So we have a good mix here. But why are we augmenting these images? Because it helps our model look at a greater variety of images, look at a greater variety of different situations, and that will help it generalize better to the testing data. It's kind of a bit like regularization, because we're giving it all sorts of flipped and transformed images. So you see set image transformations here. We just call that function under init. All it does is it sets the transformations, right? And so that's what init does. It sets up the transformations, it sets up the data frame. And then under getItem, if you look carefully, image ID equals self.image ID is I. This is basically getting the image ID at the ith position. Target equals self.df.target I. This basically gets a target at the ith position. So these two lines get the image ID and the respective target. And then image equals cv2.imread image path. So you're basically calculating the path at which the image is located, and you're loading it, right? So you've loaded the image from the path, and then this last line, you see self.transformation image. What this does is it applies all these normalization, flipping transforms to the image, right? Comma target. So this getItem function, it returns a pair, right? It returns an image and a target, right? And you can see this little function here, toTensor. All it does is it converts these NumPy arrays into PyTorch tensors, because PyTorch models don't accept NumPy arrays like Keras or TensorFlow. You need to convert them to PyTorch tensors. So that's all it does. So the end result of this getItem function is to return one image tensor and one target tensor. That's it, right? So we have the dataset set up. This is basically the heart of the data loading pipeline. So this is a lot of the work. Now the next step is the fun part, defining the model. So if you look here, I have a little utility function called global average pooling. Basically, if you think about it, the EfficientNet model takes in, it just takes in an image of size 512 by 512, right? So if you think about it, the EfficientNet input is of size 512, 512, and because there are three color channels for RGB images, it's 512, 512, 3, right? And when you pass this into EfficientNet, it gives you a feature map of size 2560, 16, 16. So what we want to do with this feature map, which EfficientNet has output, is to apply global average pooling and get a feature vector of size 2560. And that's what global average pooling does. It takes the mean across the last two axes and gets one feature vector of size 2560, like how I explained in the previous section. So as you can see here, we have reshaped the image to 3, h, w instead of h, w, 3, because that's the format which EfficientNet expects for extracting features. And then self.efn.extract features. This is basically the EfficientNet model, EfficientNet.from pretrained model. This is basically the EfficientNet B7 architecture, which we use to extract the features. And then finally, we use the average pooling function to convert our three-dimensional feature map into a vector of size 2560, and then we pass it through a dense layer with one neuron to get our probability. That's how our CancerNet model works. The image is passed through EfficientNet. We get a feature map of size 2560 into 16 into 16. We use global average pooling to get it down to 2560, and then we do one final dense layer to get our probability. And this is our binary cross entropy and accuracy. Binary cross entropy is basically the loss function which we're using. It tells us how far are predictions from the actual targets, and that will help us train our model, right? Just run these pieces of code. Okay, and this is just a simple helper function. You don't need to really understand what's happening here. It's basically just printing our training loss and accuracy in a nice colorful way. Split our data, training and validation. This basically just splits 80% of the data into the training set and 20% for validation to see how our model is doing. Okay, and this is the sampling part. So what happens here is we do a bunch of calculations to actually calculate how we want to sample our data. So if you look carefully here, remember B is the proportion of positive samples. So this line of code, C equals B comma 1 minus B into 2, it basically calculates the weightage that we want for each sample, right? And this piece of code is may look a little complex at first, but all you need to understand is that B is the probability of sampling a positive sample and 1 minus B is the probability of sampling a negative sample. And the reason we multiplied by 2 is because we have two classes and we want all the probabilities across our samples to add up to 2. So you can see the weightage function here, C1 divided by zeros, C0 divided by ones. What this does is it takes the probability of zeros and the probability of ones, and it splits it among all the samples. So if you take the probability of each sample in our data set of 33,000 images and add them all up, you'll get a probability of 2, because all the positive samples add up to a probability of 1 and all the negative samples add up to a probability of 0. And that's what this weightage function does. It distributes weights across the data samples based on the class. So because b equals 0.5, we are actually giving much higher weight to the positive samples than the negative samples, because only around 1.7% of the data is positive. So they get much higher weightage because of oversampling. Just run that code. Okay. Here we're just defining our PyTorch datasets. All we're doing here is, it's basically the dataset class that we discussed up here, except we're just initializing them. Here is the validation dataset and the training dataset. And all this piece of code does is it gets the sampling procedure. Like I said earlier, we generated the weights, sampling weights. We're applying those sampling weights to the weighted random sampler here. So we're basically telling PyTorch to sample 50% positive and 50% negative samples. And then we create our val loader and train loader. These data loaders are basically PyTorch iterables. So what that means is you can iterate over these train loaders and it'll keep supplying batches of data, right? So just run that. Okay, cool. So we have created our data loaders, and now it's time to define our model. Device equals xm.xla device. This is basically our TPU device, and network equals cancernet.to device. So we're basically initializing our cancernet model, which we defined earlier here, right? And moving it to the TPU. When we say .to device, we're moving the model from CPU to TPU. And here's our Atom optimizer. Atom is one of the best optimizers around, and it's very common. So we just initialize the Atom optimizer. It'll take a little bit of time to run this piece of code because it's loading all the EfficientNet model architecture and weights from online, from this GitHub repo here, this EfficientNet PyTorch. Okay, it says loaded pre-trained weights for EfficientNet B7. Cool. So since all the model architecture and the weights are loaded, let's actually get to the training loop. So I'll just explain briefly what's happening here. So if you look here, we're iterating through epochs, right? Epochs basically mean you're iterating through the data several times. 2 epochs means you're iterating through the entire data set twice. So you say network.train here, down here. We're just setting the network to training mode because we need to train it now. Later for inference, we want to set it to eval mode because that's when you want to infer the model, right? So network.train enables stuff like dropout, which is used during training. Network.eval kind of disables dropout because you don't need it during inference. And here, as I said earlier, for train batch and train loader, we're iterating through the train loader, right? The train loader contains all the batches that we need for training. Train image, train target. Remember, earlier here we return the image and the target, a pair of values in our data set. That's what we're retrieving here. We're retrieving the training image and the training target from the batch. And then we change the train targets tensor's size to a single column matrix because that's the size that we're expecting with the binary cross entropy loss. And then we're moving both the train image and the train target to TPU because we need to move all the data and the model to TPU for training. So we say .to device. And then these 3 lines, basically what they do, train preds equals network.forward train image. This does the forward propagation through the model. It does the entire forward propagation from beginning till end, and it gives you the prediction, right, which is a single number. And train acc and train loss. Here we're basically calculating the accuracy and the binary cross entropy, which are basically the loss and our metrics, which we need for training the model and evaluating it. So you say optimizer.zeroGrad, it's basically resetting the optimizer gradients to 0. We need to do that after every iteration, after every batch. we say train loss dot backward. Now we're doing a backward propagation using the training loss, which we calculate here, the BCE loss, right? And then xm dot optimizer step, right? We're basically doing, we're basically updating the parameters of the model using the gradients which we calculated in train loss dot backward, and then we just print the accuracy at the end of the thing. So we keep repeating this again and again and again throughout the train data set, right? And now once we're done iterating through the train data set, we set the network to eval mode, because now we're doing the validation part, right? Now you say torch.nograd. Why are we setting torch.nograd? Because we don't need PyTorch to calculate the gradients during validation. The validation phase is supposed to be only for, it's supposed to only use the forward propagation, not the backward propagation. So now it does the same thing as a training loop. It calculates the predictions and everything. It records the binary cross entropy loss. It records the accuracy. The only thing it doesn't do is updates the weights, because we don't want to train on the validation data. We want to keep it aside and use it for evaluating our model's performance. So as you can see, the same thing here, val image comma val targ. We're moving both of them to the XLA device here, calculating the accuracy and loss, okay? And then at the end here, all we're doing is printing the validation accuracy, okay? So this is the entire training loop. We're basically doing a training loop and an evaluation loop, training loop and validation loop, and we're repeating that over and over again every epoch. So if you have three epochs, for example, it's training loop, validation loop, training loop, validation loop, training loop, validation loop, 3 times. So since we have 2 epochs here, we're doing the training validation section twice, right? So if you run this, the model should start training, and training this model takes more than 2 hours. So once the model is done training, we can use it for inference, which means we can make predictions on the test data and see how the model performs. So since we cannot see the entire model train for 2 hours now, I'm going to show you an already trained model which I've trained before. Okay, so looks like it's loading up. Now this is actually the result of my model training for entire 2 hours. It trains over several batches of data, and that's why I can't show everything to you right now. Just waiting for it to load up. Okay, cool. Looks like it's actually loaded up. Okay, nice. So as you can see, this is what the training logs look like when you train it for 2 hours. It's printing the train accuracy after each batch, and then at the end of the training loop, it does an evaluation loop. You can see this progress bar here. This is basically the evaluation loop. It gives you the evaluation accuracy. You can see an accuracy of 0.861. It does the same thing again for the second epoch. And now once the model is trained, you can actually run inference, which means you can make the model make predictions on the test data, right? So as you can see here, test IDs, we're getting the test IDs for the test images. Here's the sigmoid function. We're creating the test set and the test loader to iterate through the test images. And this is basically the same thing as the evaluation loop, except we're actually keeping track of the predictions instead of the metrics. So we're calculating predictions at each batch and appending it to this list called test spreads, which has all our test predictions. And at the end, we just need to pass our test predictions through sigmoid function. Why sigmoid? Because the sigmoid function squishes all our predictions between 0 and 1 as probabilities, right? So we take the sigmoid of the test predictions. It's basically the simple inverse exponential function. And that's it. We have a bunch of probabilities between 0 and 1 for every test image. And this is our prediction. That's it, pipeline done. So as you can see here, these are some test images visualized. This one has been predicted as melanoma. This one here has also been predicted as melanoma. So that's it. That's how you train an end-to-end machine learning pipeline in PyTorch to classify melanoma images. And as you can see, we have achieved a AUC, ROC AUC of 0.845. It's different from accuracy. So an AUC of 0.845 is actually not the same as an accuracy of 0.845. It's actually pretty good, not bad. But you can push it closer to 0.9 with some extra tricks. With some extra tricks like changing the sampling procedure, training on more epochs. Here I had a time limit of 3 hours, so I trained it only for 2 epochs. So if I train for more epochs, probably get closer to 0.9. You can also use the tabular features, the metadata features, such as the part of the body and everything that was given in the data set, to boost the accuracy even further. So I would like to conclude on the fact that this is a complete pipeline, but it still has improvements to be made. You can push the AUC even further up to 0.9 with some basic tweaks to this particular pipeline. So that's it. That's how you build an end-to-end image classification pipeline. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, please like, share and subscribe, because this is my first video, just getting started. And if you want to actually run all this code, you can go to the kernel, which I will link down in the description below. Go to the kernel and click on these 3 dots here and say copy and edit kernel, so that you can actually run the code yourself and see what the results will be. You probably will be able to reproduce this nice score of 0.845. So like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned to my channel. Stay tuned for more videos. I'll be uploading every week. So bye. Hope you enjoyed. Okay.